the greatest empire the world has ever known. An empire of legions, of emperors, of marble and conquest that would rule for 1,000 years, did not begin with a king. It began with a wolf. A wild she-wolf who found 2 helpless human infants abandoned on a riverbank, left there to die. And where men had condemned these children to death, the wild animal chose to give them life. She warmed them, she fed them, she kept them alive. And those 2 children would grow up to found the city of Rome. This is the story of Lupa, the she-wolf who suckled an empire, and of the terrible truth at the heart of Rome's birth, that a wild beast showed more mercy than men ever did. Like so many legends, it begins with betrayal. In the ancient city of Alba Longa, in the land that would one day become Italy, there ruled a good king named Numitor. But Numitor had a brother, and that brother's name was Amulius. Amulius hungered for the throne, and he took it by force, casting his own brother down and seizing power for himself. But a stolen crown is never safe. Amulius knew that as long as Numitor's bloodline survived, there would always be an heir who could rise against him. Numitor had a daughter. Her name was Rhea Silvia, and to make certain she would never bear a child who might one day claim his throne, Amulius forced her to become a priestess, sworn to lifelong chastity, forbidden ever to be a mother. He thought he had secured his reign forever. He was wrong. For no decree of a mortal king can bind the will of the gods. Despite her vows, Rhea Silvia became pregnant. And when she gave birth, it was not to one child, but 2 twin boys. She named them Romulus and Remus. And their father, the legend says, was no mortal man. Their father was Mars himself, the god of war. These were no ordinary infants. Divine blood ran in their veins, the blood of the god of war and the royal line of Alba Longa, joined in 2 tiny children. When word reached Amulius that his niece had borne twin sons, he was seized with fury and fear. Here was the very thing he had tried to prevent: heirs, a threat to his stolen throne. 2 infants who, if they lived, might one day tear the crown from his head. The tyrant made his decision. The children had to die. But even a tyrant feared the gods. Amulius did not dare to kill the infants with his own hands, for they carried divine blood, and to spill it directly might bring the wrath of the heavens upon him. So he chose a crueler, more cowardly path. He would let the wild do his killing for him. He ordered the twins taken to the river Tiber and cast into its waters to drown, to be swept away and forgotten, their deaths blamed on nature rather than on him. A servant was given the terrible task. He carried the 2 infants down to the river's edge. But when he looked at the helpless children, so small, so innocent, his heart failed him. He could not bring himself to drown them. Instead, he placed them in a basket, and he set that basket upon the flooded waters of the Tiber. Perhaps he told himself it was fate's choice now, not his. He let them go, and he turned away. And the river carried the children of Mars into the unknown. The Tiber was swollen and wild that day, its waters high and flooding far beyond its banks. And here, the legend tells us, the first mercy came not from man, but from the world itself. The basket did not sink. It did not shatter on the rocks. It floated, carried gently on the floodwaters, drifting away from the deep and deadly current. As the waters slowly receded, the basket came to rest on soft ground in the marshy land at the foot of a hill that would one day be called the Palatine, the very heart of the future Rome. There the two infants lay in their little basket on the muddy earth, alone, abandoned by the world of men. Too young to walk, too young to even crawl, helpless, hungry, and crying out into an empty wilderness.
By every law of nature, they should not have survived the night. Two human babies, alone in the wild, were nothing more than easy prey. And then, drawn by their cries, a predator came. Out of the wilderness she came, a wild she-wolf, Lupa. She was everything the infants should have feared, a hunter, a killer, an apex predator of these wild lands. She came down to the water to drink, and she heard the thin, desperate cries of the two human children. And here, at this moment, the whole story of Rome balances on a knife's edge. For a wild wolf, two helpless infants are not children to be saved. They are a meal, an easy kill. Everything in her nature, everything in her instinct, should have told her to devour them. But she did not. Instead, moved by something the ancients could only explain as maternal instinct or the will of the gods themselves, the she-wolf did the opposite of what her nature demanded. She approached the crying infants gently, and she offered them not death, but her own body's warmth and milk. She let them nurse. She kept them alive. The wildest creature of that land had looked upon two abandoned children and chosen to become their mother. She carried them, the legend says, to her den, a cave at the foot of the Palatine Hill, a place that would forever after be called the Lupercal, sacred to Rome for all its history. And there, in the lair of a wild wolf, the founders of Rome were raised in their first and most fragile days. She nursed them. She warmed them through the cold nights. She protected them with all the ferocity of a wolf defending her own cubs from every other predator that might have finished what the river started. The old stories tell that she was not alone in her care. A woodpecker, another creature sacred to their father Mars, brought food to the growing boys. The wild itself, it seemed, had conspired to keep these children alive. The animals of the forest succeeded where the cruelty of men had tried to fail them. Think on the strangeness of it. The heirs to a kingdom, the sons of a god, the founders of the mightiest empire in history, nursed at the belly of a wild wolf, in a cave, in the wilderness. Rome did not begin in a palace, it began in a wolf's den. For a time, the wild raised them, but the twins were not meant to live forever as creatures of the forest. One day, a shepherd came upon the astonishing sight. His name was Faustulus, and what he saw at the mouth of the wolf's den, he could scarcely believe. A wild she-wolf gently tending two human children as though they were her own. Faustulus understood that he was witnessing something extraordinary, something touched by the divine. He gathered up the two boys and he carried them home to his wife, a woman named Laurentia. And together, the shepherd and his wife raised Romulus and Remus as their own sons. The twins grew into strong young men, natural leaders, fearless and bold, marked by something greater than the humble shepherd's life around them. They did not yet know they were the sons of a god and the heirs of a stolen throne. But the fire of their destiny burned in them all the same. And in time, the truth of their origins would come to light, and with it, the chance for justice.
When at last Romulus and Remus learned who they truly were, the grandsons of the rightful king, the heirs Amulius had tried to murder in their cradle, they did not hesitate. They raised a force. They marched on Alba Longa, and they brought down the tyrant who had stolen a throne and condemned 2 infants to die in a river. Amulius was killed, and Numitor, their grandfather, the rightful king, robbed of his crown so many years before, was at last restored to his throne. The wrong that had set the whole story in motion was, after all these years, finally made right. The infants who should have died in the Tiber had returned as men and toppled the very king who had ordered their deaths. Fate, it seemed, had protected them for exactly this purpose. But their destiny was not to rule their grandfather's city. It was to build something new, something that would outlast them all. Romulus and Remus set out to found a city of their own, on the very hills where the she-wolf had once saved them. But here, at the moment of Rome's birth, the story turns dark. For the 2 brothers, who had shared a womb, shared a basket on the river, shared the milk of the same wild wolf, who had survived every danger together, could not agree on who would rule. They quarreled over which hill to build upon, over whose name the city would carry, over who would be king. And that quarrel turned to violence. As the walls of the new city were rising, the brothers fought. And in that fight, Romulus killed Remus, his own twin, his brother, the child who had lain beside him in the wolf's den. The city was built. It was named Rome, after Romulus, who became its first king. An empire was born that day, an empire that would conquer the known world. But it was born in a brother's blood. And so consider the strange and terrible truth at the heart of Rome's beginning. 2 children were condemned to death, not by beasts, but by men. By the ambition of a tyrant, by the fear of a king. It was humans who cast them into the river to die. And it was a wild animal, a predator, a wolf, the very thing they should have feared most, who looked upon those helpless infants and chose to save them. The she-wolf gave them the mercy that men had denied them. She gave them warmth where men gave them a cold river. She gave them life where men gave them a death sentence.
And how did the story end? Those same children, raised on the mercy of a wolf, grew up, and one brother killed the other. The wild had shown them kindness, and they, in the end, showed each other none. Perhaps that is why Rome never forgot her. For all its power, all its legions and emperors and glory, Rome chose as its enduring symbol not a king, not a god, not a conqueror, but a wolf. The she-wolf, with 2 infants at her belly, cast in bronze. Lupa Capitolina. She stands to this day, because Rome remembered the truth that started it all, that the greatest empire in human history owed its very existence to the mercy of a wild animal.
That before the marble and the legions, there was only a cave, 2 crying children, and a wolf who chose, against all her nature, to be a mother. The wild gave life to Rome, and the wild has never been forgotten. If this story stirred something in you, there's more of the wild and the legends it inspired waiting here every week. Subscribe and listen for the call of the wild.